made to worship. Who steps in? The Big Macs at this point. And this is the book of Maccabees. This is the book of Maccabees, about 167 BC. Book of Maccabees, about 167 BC. I'm not big on the date and stuff, but I'm just trying to give you a fix of where it is. The Ptolemies are off at 200. The Ptolemies are defeated. And now 167, the Maccabees. Now what happens with the Maccabees? These are the Big Macs. I call them the Big Macs, okay? The Big Macs. First of all, there's a father, Mattathias. Mattathias is the father. He's an old man. The Syrian legate comes out to his town, Modin, and basically says, hey, Mattathias, I want you to offer this thing that's unclean. I don't know if it was a pig or whatever. I want you to offer this thing that's unclean on the altar. You're the high priest, you're the priest in the area, and so therefore offer this on the altar, and then we're cool with you. We won't mess with you. You've adopted Greek culture. We're cool. You're cool. Just offer this thing that's unclean on the altar. Matthias is like, hey, I'm an old man. I've never offered anything unclean. I'm not going to do this, man. Well, this kid looks at Matthias and says, hey, Matthias, you're an old man. You get killed. You've lived your whole life. This is no good. I'm a young kid. I got my whole life before me. So this young kid takes that which is unclean, goes up, and he's going to offer it on the altar. Matthias, the old man, grabs the young kid who's Jewish and kills him on the spot before he can offer that on there. So Matthias then revolts against the Syrian legate, but Matthias, the old man, well, he gets killed fairly quickly. He's got 5 sons. And his 5 sons are called the Big Macs. And this is the Maccabees. His 5 sons, Mattathias, the priest's sons, then revolt against the Syrians. These 5 boys then put together basically a guerrilla warfare, man, and they go after the Syrians who are trying to force them into Hellenism. The first one is really an important guy. He's probably the most important. He's Judas Maccabeus. Judas Maccabeus. He is called the Maccabee. Maccabee means hammer. This guy was a warrior. Judas was a warrior. They called him the hammer because he hammered stuff, okay? And he lives for about 6 years. He's going to get killed, but he's a warrior. He leads the Maccabean revolt. This Judas Maccabeus is the one who leads the revolt against the Syrian Antiochus Epiphanes and his generals. Mostly his generals, Lysias, Gorius, and others and stuff. Judas Maccabee goes up to Jerusalem and actually takes Jerusalem. He takes Jerusalem and he purifies the temple. He takes it, throws down all the defiling images of Antiochus and all these wicked things. He takes it all out, they purify it, and then, by the way, they have light. They were only supposed to have like 7 days of light with this olive oil, and rumor has it that God multiplied the oil to make it last an 8th day, which is really kind of interesting because this purifying of the temple and the multiplying of oil for the lights then becomes what's known as the Feast of Lights. The Jews to this day celebrate the Maccabean purification of the temple is in 167 BC is celebrated to this day everywhere around the world by Jews. It's called the Feast of Lights in the New Testament. Actually, Jesus celebrates this purifying of the temple. Today, you guys know it as Hanukkah. You say, Happy Hanukkah. When does that happen? Around our Christmas time in December. That Feast of Hanukkah, Happy Hanukkah, was started by Judas Maccabeus when he purified the temple, and there was the multiplication, and the Feast of Lights was started, and the Jews celebrate Hanukkah till this day. So Judas Maccabeus was is quite a guy. He's definitely a general, a leader, and he just actually did kind of tremendous things. Now okay. Now, we've got to get down to some of his brothers, and he did Hanukkah. Okay, down to his brothers. The next brother that's actually, this guy's not really important, but it's always sad. When you read the book of Maccabees, basically what happened is the Syrians come down, not on camels. The Syrians come down out of Damascus on elephants. And they attack this place called Beit Zor. It's not important, but they're at Beit Zor. And Eleazar Maccabee looks up and he says, okay, they're on elephants. We're on the ground with our little sticks and stones and spears and stuff. They're at elephants with guys shooting bows and arrows down at us. We're dead meat. We got to take this guy out. So what he does is he says, I want to take out the biggest elephant, because who probably was riding on the biggest elephant? Yeah, the biggest general would be over the biggest elephant. So Eleazar goes under the elephant. He gets himself under the elephant so they can't shoot him. And then he's under the elephant and he starts stabbing the elephant from underneath. He picks the biggest elephant and he goes after it. And he stabs from underneath. But the problem is when you're stabbing the elephant from underneath, yes, indeed, he killed the elephant. But when the elephant is stabbed underneath and gets killed, the elephant falls flat. And Eleazar was crushed under the elephant. And so he's one of the great heroes of the Maccabean revolt. I just like this guy because he has so much courage. He goes after the biggest elephant, single-handedly kills the elephant, but then, of course, he gives his life and the elephant crushes him. So that's Eleazar. I call him the Elephant Man. Sorry about that, but it's in the book of Maccabees. It's fairly interesting, those kind of stuff. Jonathan, Judas was the fighter. Judas was the fighter. Judas was the general. Judas is the one that went to war against the Syrians and the Seleucids and the Antiochus. Jonathan, now he comes along later. Jonathan comes along after Judas has thrown off the Syrians and things. Jonathan plays more of a diplomatic role. And so you have this military punch and then followed up by a diplomat. And a diplomat, Jonathan, takes over, and the Syrians allow him to become high priest. So now Jonathan, a Maccabee, becomes the high priest. And he's in the priestly line. His father was a priest and stuff, so everything's cool. Jonathan then tries to do diplomacy and try to make good times with the Syrians. And by the way, the Syrians don't want to fight that much because, frankly, the Syrians got to pay the Romans taxes. And so rumor has it, the Syrians go down into Egypt and the Romans show up and drew a circle around him and said, hey, you got to pay us taxes. He says, I don't want to. They said, before you leave the circle, you're going to have to pay, agree to pay the taxes. So basically Jonathan then tries to make peace with them and becomes the high priest and tries to make diplomacy. Jonathan dies, however, and then Simon, the younger brother, takes over. Simon is the youngest one. Simon is the dynasty builder. Simon and his descendants build the dynasty out of the Maccabees that is called the Hasmonean dynasty. This word here, Hasmonean, Simon is the head of that Hasmonean dynasty. So Simon is one of the 5 Maccabees boys, and he then basically, through his descendant, father, son, father, son, father, son, produces a dynasty. That's what dynasty, father, son, father, son. His dynasty will go all the way down to the time of Herod, King Herod the Great. So we're going to look at next this Hasmonean dynasty. Okay? Simon and his descendants. These are all Maccabees then. These are Maccabees. So the Maccabees throw off the Syrians. Judas fights them. Jonathan diplomatizes them, and Simon then sets up a dynasty after that'll go on for over 100 years, about 100 years. Okay, so Simon then sets up the Hasmonean dynasty, and this is what the book of Maccabees is about. And if you're in this class, you realize we read the book of Maccabees and all the warfare going on there. It's a really interesting history. By the way, the book of Maccabees is not accepted in the Protestant canonical texts. It's considered the Apocrypha. The Roman Catholics accept it. The Protestants don't. Is it interesting history? Now, I would say that's not the Word of God, but is it interesting history and is it actually factually accurate and things? Yeah, it's good history. So I always think it's important to kind of read that history to get a background for the New Testament, because the Maccabees are going to play a background for this reaction against being forcibly reculturized in another culture. That same battle is going to take place against Rome. And actually, John, the book of Revelation, is going to have the same struggle between the tension between Roman culture dominating Christianity. And you're going to see different reactions to it then.